Throughout the Chicago Bulls changes since the trade deadline, there's been a surprising duel that has popped in, and what I think that means for the Chicago Bulls' future. Also, going to look at Buzelis and what he's gaining from this recent development. Also, we're going to look at why Billy Donovan says Trey Jones has the it factor, and despite the Bulls being destined for the play-in, why we cannot let a small sample size dictate our large part of our future. We're going to talk about all that, plus preview the game tonight and dive a little bit into the mailbag right after this.
You are now tuned in to Chicago Bulls Central, your number one place for all Chicago Bulls news and content.
What's going on, Bulls fans? Welcome to another episode of Chicago Bulls Central, your number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related. I'm the host, Hayes, but more importantly, you guys can follow the channel at Bulls Central Pod on every social media platform we happen to be on. With that said, let's go ahead and get into this content for today, y'all. And listen, we still sit in the Chicago Bulls fan civil war versus the tankers versus the non-tankers. All that, and I'm just trying to sit somewhere in the middle of that and just be objective, right? And one of the things that you have to be objective about is that the opportunity for growth that the players have here, right? And there's a couple of players, four, that I'm going to kind of zero in on and talk about specifically here. I'm going to start off with Josh Giddey. Of course, we all know that the run that Josh Giddey's been on since the All-Star break, he's just been playing amazingly well, right? Josh Giddey's averaging 20 points, 9.6 assists, 9.6 rebounds, 7.9 assists. That's his stretch, not just since the All-Star break, but that's since February 11th, right? That's since basically Zach Collins and the new crew joined the Chicago Bulls. He's been shooting the ball extremely well on splits of 51% from the field, 54% from three, and 84% from the free throw line, which that free throw line number I need to see him keep up amazingly well. Also, like we've all heard the growth that Josh Giddey has, right? Josh Giddey's had tremendous growth, it looks like, on paper. Now, here's what not on paper, in reality, if you're watching the basketball game. I don't know why that on paper part slipped out. Many people are still asking, well, how legitimate is this, right? And like I said on yesterday's episode, two things can be true at the same time. And I think with Josh Giddey, like the growth that you've seen from him is good. It's great. You can celebrate it. But I still think from the business aspect of this, that the Chicago Bulls in restricted free agency still should, not necessarily just give Josh Giddey anything that he wants. It still should be a negotiation. And if that in that negotiation, you can't necessarily come up with with an agreement, letting Josh Giddey in a restricted free agency where you have the right to match any offer that he gets, let him go out there and see what is the fair offer. And that could add some clarity for both the Chicago Bulls and Josh Giddey in his representation. I think a lot of people look at when you go through restricted free agency and someone says, well, go and find your deal will match it. Some people take that as a negative, which I really don't understand why, because it isn't, right? It adds, like I said, it kind of adds a third party. And it's like arbitration in a way in baseball, right? It allows, another party to come in, right? And say, all right, Eric, this is the value that we see you at. And sometimes that can make the player realize, okay, well, for example, I always look back on not the contract Zach LaVine was on that we traded him on, but if you look at his contract before that, when Zach LaVine was in restricted free agency, right, and he went out and signed an offer sheet with the Kings. In that offer sheet was injury provisions. Now, if the Bulls would have come to the table with Zach LaVine, and maybe they did and said, hey, we want some provisions in here, in case you're injury, because you at that point he had played one season under the Chicago Bulls, and it is what it is. And by letting him go out and find his deal, right? The Kings say, no, we need some injury provisions if we're going to sign this offer sheet. The Bulls were then able to match the offer, and Zach LaVine and his representation realized, all right, it wasn't the Bulls that put that injury provision in. It was a third party that looked at this independently, that didn't have ties to us at that time, other than the openness of us coming to the team, which is funny that he ends up being then traded to the Sacramento Kings. But that was the team that put the injury provisions in. Now, of course, nothing that drastic in regards to Josh Giddey needing any injury provisions in his contract, but it does add a level of clarity when you look at just the fairness of the deal. And I think also for the Bulls, it may make them more aware of, hey, this is what the open market views Josh Giddey at. If you were reluctant to give him $30 million, you see that the market's willing to give him $30 million. I don't know if that's going to be the case, right? And then the Bulls, all right, we'll match the offer. Cool. It was a fair market deal. And then that way your fan base for that much already, like if the Bulls on the day, on the opening of free agency, signs Josh Giddey the $30 million, there are going to be a lot of Bulls fans that once again look at it and say, AK better gets himself in still loss. If he goes out and he meets with a couple of teams, signs an offer sheet for $30 million, and then the Bulls match it, you're still going to get fans that bitch, but at least they can't say, hey, AK paid him a deal that nobody else was willing to offer, like we did with Patrick Williams, right? So I still think that restricted free agency is still the place that this is going to go through, and we'll see what the future does hold there, man. And I know people have said, well, what about the other teams? They're going to be willing, like every team that anybody has mentioned, as far as like the Jazz, the Spurs, who just traded for a point guard. You know, people even try, the Spurs are going to go all in. I'm like, you're stupid. They just traded for De'Aaron Fox, a much better point guard and long-term pairing next to Wemby. But nonetheless, you know, somebody even brought up the Mavs in that when they have Kyrie Irving and they don't have the cap space outright to sign Giddey to an offer sheet. So it's like, you know, I think the Bulls are going to sit in a good place if they allow that to happen, right? But then I want to use the Josh Giddey conversation to leapfrog into something else, right? Somebody who's proven to be a really good 1-2 punch, and actually he's proven to be the Bulls' best duo in their minutes together since the trade deadline, is Zach Collins. Zach Collins, since coming to the Chicago Bulls, is averaging 12.7 points per game, 8.5 rebounds, 2.4 assists on 54% shooting from the field. That's on about 25 minutes per game, right? But the more important thing, when you look at Josh Giddey and Zach Collins together, in the 166 minutes that they've played together, that's the fifth of most of any two-player lineup that the Bulls have used in on the entire season. Their offensive rating is 122.9, defensive rating of 106, right, which is crazy. That is by far the best combo of any that the Bulls have put out there on the court together. They have a net rating of plus 16.4, which is second best of any player. The only other player that has a better net rating with Josh Giddey on the court as far as a 1-2 player punch is Herter, Kevin Herter and Josh Giddey. So it's clear there that there's chemistry. And the thing and Zach Collins luckily is under contract next year as well. And I think the thing that this highlights, and like I've been saying, basically, I said this 2 games into us seeing them together, it's good to see that it's continued, is that this, to many people's point, highlights the importance of having a center that is more athletic, more engaged, right? Can play and do both sides of the ball really well, right? And let's be clear, Zach Collins isn't even the most athletic player. He's not the strongest player either. He's just a smart player that understands how to play the game of basketball. That veteran mind that he has, being on the teams that he has definitely helped tremendously as well. These are all things that are pointing into a good direction for the Chicago Bulls. So Zach Collins is another guy him alone's playing well. But then when you look at the combination between him and Giddey, what's coming out of that, right? And then also how that factors into maybe some of the offseason decisions that the Bulls do have to make, right? I'm still of the mind that you take the best player available. No matter where you pick at right now, where the Bulls are at and how much talent they need, you take the best player available. Not the best project available, the best player available. The Bulls in the past have taken the best project available. This is where you take the best player available, right? And I think in taking that, you can't really look at positions so much so, right, in that. But if the Bulls did want to take the best center prospect available at that time, I'm not too mad at that either when we see these numbers that we're seeing with Zach Collins and Josh Giddey on the court. There's something in that, and it's tangible, right? Now, the wins aren't there, which is always the thing that you can go back to as well, but I think there is something tangible in that. Now, the next player that I want to talk about over this stretch who's played really well is Modest Buzelis, right? While all the bitching about winning or losing or tanking or not has been going on, Modest Buzelis has been getting hugely important opportunity, right? Not only in the time that he's out there on the court, right, which he's clearly become a better player over that time. Again, small sample size, but also the matchups that he's grown, both offensively and defensively. Modest Buzelis has had to guard some really good players over this stretch for the Chicago Bulls. Really, really damn good players, right? And that is something that is what really helps jumpstart your development, is you going out there and seeing where you measure out against other players that are at your level, players that are better than you. That's what matters in this, right? You look at like against the Miami Heat, he drew the Bam out of bio defensive assignment. Against the Orlando Magic, he guarded a combination of Franz and Paolo Banchero, right? Against the Cleveland Cavaliers, like the matchups that he had there that worked for him. All those things that end up helping this team, like that's what helps growth. Indiana Pacers, right? The matchups that he did there, right? So it in what Modest is getting over starting over this last part of the season has been hugely important for him. Oh, my lights died. It is what it is. But that's still the thing there, and that's growth that's really important for Modest. On top of it, let's not act like his play hasn't improved. You're seeing a Modest Buzelis that is understanding how to use his dribble, how to create separation better, right? How to attack the rim better, right? How to play within an offense. There's still some lapses in there, right? Stacey King, rightfully so, calls those out a lot when he talks about like, oh, well, this is where you missed your rotation. You should have hedged here. You should have left your guy to rotate quicker here, like those type of things, right? And that's still really good growth, especially if his coaches are actually coaching him up. And that's what we're seeing from Modest Buzelis. The important growth is there, right? And that over the last 18 games of the season, getting that experience for Modest Buzelis is going to be hugely important. And let's keep that up. Another guy that's still hugely important to the Bulls, and I get why he's kind of falling out, but Coby White is still one of the most important pieces on this team as far as contributing to wins. You still need a Coby White that's locked in, right? And you still need a Coby White that scores well. You still need a Coby White. He is still a huge X factor, not only for the Chicago Bulls on the court now, but for the Bulls in the future, right? When you look at free agency upcoming this offseason, Coby White is a huge factor in that. Because if the Bulls see him as a piece of their future, you'll see them operate differently. If they look to move him, this offseason is probably going to be the best time. Yes, you can move him as an expiring contract at the deadline, but you may want to move him earlier, right? And that's where the Bulls, it's a huge X factor in that, because what you can get back or what does that signify in the direction that your team's going, that's a huge part of this. So, we'll see what the future does hold for Coby. I love Coby White as a player, but the Bulls have to make some tough decisions as well, right? And those tough decisions, the answers to those tough decisions are going to be what really molds the Chicago Bulls' future. And we'll see what that future does hold here, man. But overall, I think that you got a lot of things that you're still looking at for this team. And those are for the players that really kind of matter the most in different areas for the Bulls. Now, for my tankers, right? And for my pro tankers, my anti-tankers, the Bulls are going to make the play-in, right? And that's the thing. And while fans getting excited over the play-in is not a problem, right? While the fans saying, hey, I want to see this team play, I want to see this team compete in the play-in, the biggest thing that I think, and I kind of overlooked this in talking, is that once again, AK and Eversley can't fall in love with the play-in, right? You can't fall in love with being in the play-in and make that think again that you're more competitive than what you are. That's always been the dangers of the play-in tournament, is that it can make a team, especially if the team doesn't have the type of winning mindset that you need to lock into, make them fall progressively in love and make you think that you're closer than what you really are, right? And so that's something as well that the Bulls, that is the onus is on the front office in that case, to not fall in love with the play-in. Do not fall in love with that play-in tournament, but fall in love with the progress on how you got to that play-in tournament, if that makes sense. That's what I want to see from the Chicago Bulls. Do not fall in love with the play-in. Don't. Because if you do, you're going to wind up in what's been proven. Hell, look at the Bulls. We've gotten worse every year, and we've been in the play-in every single year, right? Do not fall in love with the play-in tournament, because that's not where your future lies, right? But I will say this, and I've said this many times before, making the play-in as a young and up-and-coming team is very different from making the play-in with an old veteran team that's supposed to be competing for the playoffs. So there's still definitely growth that can be done there. We'll see what the future holds for the Bulls. But one of the players that has the biggest question on what their future holds is Trey Jones. Billy Donovan had a great quote when it came to Trey Jones. He said this: he's got something. He's got the it factor for me. He really does. He's just a winner. You can look at size and length for position, and he probably doesn't have any of those things, but he has really good speed, really good toughness. He's got high IQ. He understands competition. He can really stay in the moment and compete. The last 2 games on the road, he's been great. He's got a lot of substance, a lot of competitive character to him. He's made a big 3 in Orlando. He made a big 3 in the Orlando game. He made a big one tonight. I felt a lot of our guys did a lot of good things other than scoring. Trey Jones has absolutely turned some eyes as his time here with the Chicago Bulls. Both me, fans, and other people that didn't necessarily know how to really read into the Trey Jones acquisition and what he could bring for this team that was already very extremely overly guard heavy. And that's what we're seeing for this Bulls team, is a team that yes, they're guard heavy, but listen, Trey Jones is showing up. And you can't deny how Trey Jones is showing up for this Bulls team, at least not in my opinion. Now, the future is questionable around Trey Jones just because of the position that he does play, and we got to see where that's going to go ultimately. But like I said before, I'm not mad if the Bulls find a way to keep Trey Jones. I'm just not. We'll see what the future does hold there. But all right, we got a game tonight against the Indiana Pacers, and this is a team that's really been playing very well over the last 10 games. Really, over the last 20 games, they've really woken up after a slow start to the season. And the Pacers are a team where they are one of the perfect examples of why you do not give up early in the season. Like, they did not look that good this season. Tyrese Halliburton didn't look that good at the beginning of the season, but this team has worked itself all the way up to having the 15th best net rating in the game of basketball. Their offensive efficiency has gotten back up to where it was at times last year, 8th overall offensive efficiency and 17th in defensive rating, which is better than what they were last year, right? Now, that is the key factor in this on why the Indiana Pacers can be even a better team than what they were last year in the playoffs, because their defensive efficiency, last year they were 24th in defensive rating on the season. This year, they are 17th in defensive rating. And like I've talked about before with the Bulls, if you have a high-powered offense, you don't need your defense to necessarily be elite, but you need it to be right around the middle of the pack or slightly lower. They're 2 below the middle of the pack. They have the 4th best true shooting percentage in the NBA, the 3rd best effective field goal shooting percentage. They are a team that likes to pass the ball around as well, and they get blocks. They protect the rim. Now, this is a team we competed closely against before. Something to say that with the way that the Bulls are playing, the added chemistry that we've had since that game, the Bulls could definitely win this game, and they can, right? The Bulls got to be prepared here. If they're not, they could get punched in the teeth, and if they get punched in the teeth, we've already seen that it's a little bit more difficult for the Bulls team, but not as difficult for this version of the team. So let's see how the Bulls stay locked in today, right? Defensively, what do they bring? Does Vooch make his return? I mean, we haven't really heard anything, right? We'll see what happens there. Does Lonzo play tonight? Because that's going to drastically change some things if he does. But overall, the connectivity that we've seen between this team, playing as a team, is hugely important in a game like tonight. Can the Bulls get it done? Let's see. I hope that they can. I think that they can. But I know there are a lot of Bulls fans that hope that they won't. So that is what it is there. We'll see what the future does hold, man. But we got one more mailbag to follow up on, cleared out from last week. This one's from my brother Corn.
Hey, what it don't do, King Drip? It's your brother Corn, man. Man, my shit been fucking up as well, so, I'm just leaving this. I know you got through watching the mailbag episode, man. It was nice, man. But let me get right into what I was talking about. And what I was talking about was Josh motherfucking Giddy. I want to ask everybody one question. How do y'all feel about the trade with AC now? Real talk. How do you feel about the trade with AC now? Everybody that's been talking down, see, I'm happy that I was one of the people that was okay with the trade. I wasn't all the way pissed off over the trade. I did want an additional pick with the trade. It wouldn't sweeten up the deal. But the trade itself, I wasn't as mad. But everybody was up in arms. You would have thought we just traded Luka, right? And I got somebody to ask. I got a lot of things to ask everybody. Yes, we love AC. AC is great. We love him. He was a great ambassador for Chicago, the type of player we love, right? But at the end of the day, would AC be playing right now? Y'all know what I'm talking about. Would Alex Caruso even be playing ball right now? Or would he be sitting on the sideline injured? See, that's what a lot of people kind of key to forget when it comes to AC. Sometimes, like, you know what I mean? Let you know that right now that he probably is injured and out and not even playing around this time. But Giddy is right now, and Giddy is balling. I just want to ask everybody that was crying and bitching about the motherfucking trade, how the fuck do you feel about the trade now? Just keep it 100. How do y'all feel? Who do y'all feel won the trade now, as this day? As this day. February 9th, 2025, like Hayes said, the days of our Lord. How do y'all feel about the trade? Hey, that's all I got to say. I feel good about it. About this time. I feel really, really good. Hey, King Drip, man. Sorry about the little mailbag mix-up, man. You already know, brother. You know I love you. Appreciate you like always, big brother, man. Keep on doing your thing. You the greatest at this.
All right, Corn. How do you view the Josh Giddey trade now, right? And this is why I always say this. You always want to evaluate a trade 3 times, right? And one, how do you initially feel about the trade package that you got back, right? And I still think that it's fair that in the moment, in that time, when you look at the number of picks that the OKC Thunder had and the fact that the Bulls didn't get one of them, that is still fair that some fans looked at that and said, hey, did the Bulls really get everything that they could back from the OKC Thunder? Now, I do think that was always disproportionately placed on the player that Josh Giddey is, but that's a fairness that always to ask that question, right? And 2, you want to reframe that based off how do what pieces stay around, especially when both were free agents. We know that with AC, he signed an extension. We still don't know what that holds for Josh Giddey, right? What's going to be the future there. But you also want to look at it a couple of years down the road. And I do think that as we look at the long-term implications of that trade, that the Bulls are going to win that. Like, when you look at the way that Josh Giddey plays at 22 years old, and the people that are comparing the box score stats for AC to the box score stats for Josh Giddey, that's never going to be smart because AC isn't just a box score guy. If you've been a Bulls fan, you saw him on the Bulls player team, you know his impact isn't always indicated in the box score. But one thing that I will say is that Josh Giddey, even there, right? Like the questions are there. So, I mean, for AC, the questions are there. So I think overall, like, the long term, as long as the Bulls are able to re-sign Josh Giddey, that the Bulls are going to win the AC trade. It just is what it is, right? And you always had the better chance of winning that trade because you got the 22-year-old prospect. So, you know, it is what it is. Yeah, it sucks that we didn't get a first-round pick. And again, 2 things can be true at the same time. People could still say, hey, I still think we should have got at least a second in that trade. But when you look at the talent, I think when you look at it, Josh Giddey has a chance to impact the Bulls so much. And for that, got to win for your franchise. At least that's the way that I look at it. But you guys can let me know how you feel on it down below. Make sure you guys are following us at Bulls Central Pod. You send us any feedback, questions, comments, concerns. BullsCentralPod@gmail.com. Lastly, if you want to leave a text message and our voicemail for the mailbag, the number to do so, 773-270-2799. We're the number 1 spot for everything Chicago Bulls related, but that's thanks to you lovely and beautiful people. And like I like to end every episode on, go Bulls. Love you guys. See red if you can, y'all. Peace.
This has been a presentation of the Break Media.